church benches and into the trenches. Let's make a righteous ruckus.
Hey, welcome back to the Righteous Ruckus podcast. I'm once again your gracious host, Riley Lowe. Now, I went to the doctor the other day, and the doctor told me it was just a checkup. And they were looking over my blood work, my blood pressure and everything. And they said, hey, you need to, they said, here's our advice is that don't eat anything fatty. And I said, okay, you mean like bacon or like greasy cheeseburgers or what are we talking about? He goes, well, let me clarify. Fatty, don't eat anything. So that's just a little self-deprecating humor to start it off with. And my voice is about ready to give out. I don't know what exactly is going on here, but my voice, it's some sort of, whether it be pollen in the air or whatever, my voice is right there teetering on the edge. Actually, years ago, I lost my voice when I was at work in my career at the refinery. And, I told them then I could barely speak at all. And when I did, it came out in a high pitch. It was like, hey, well. It was so funny. And I told them when I showed up to work, I figured I'd just nip it in the bud, any kind of jokes. And I said, well, for the rest of the night, guys, you guys are just going to have to call me Shetland Pony because I'm a little hoarse. So in any event, today I want to jump into maybe I'll call it Facing Goliath, right? Facing Goliath. We're all extremely, extremely familiar with the story of David and Goliath. Even if you're not a Christian, and I think if you haven't even been raised in a church or around Sunday school or vacation Bible school or any kind of church structure, you have probably heard of David and Goliath. There's a very good chance of that. And there's a point in here that I want to focus on, and it's such a huge point that, it's just, I had never considered it till it was brought to my attention recently. And it was really amazing. And I think you're going to really, really enjoy that. So I'm going to dive right in here on, David and Goliath. This is 1 Samuel, verse 17 is the story of David and Goliath, right? Now, if you remember, David was raised, tending sheep. He was a shepherd out. Back in those days, you didn't have them in a pen. You went and grazed them. Like the shepherd would follow along and basically live with the sheep for a while. It was actually somewhat of a lowly occupation, a pretty lowly occupation, and looked down upon a little bit by society there. But anyway, I want to start here. Let's start in, we got time. So I want to refresh your memory on the events that transpired. Okay. So 1 Samuel 17, let's start at verse 38 and we'll read down there for a while, maybe till verse 52-ish, somewhere around there. So the story of David and Goliath, starting in 1 Samuel 17:38. Then Saul clothed David in his own tunic, put a bronze helmet on his head, and dressed him in his armor. David strapped his sword over the tunic and he tried to walk, but he was not accustomed to them. I cannot walk in these, David said to Saul, which was the king, right? I'm not accustomed to them. So David took them off. He took off the armor, he took off the helmet, and he took off the sword, right? I'm not accustomed to these. And David took his staff in his hand, his shepherd's staff, right? And selected 5 smooth stones from the brook and put them in his pouch of his shepherd's bag. And with his sling in hand, he approached the Philistine. So there's a lot happened right there. When he took the 5 smooth stones from the river, from the brook, right? This was likely he's on his way. And because they're in a valley, right? They're on either side of this valley. These armies have met up and they're screaming back and forth at each other, challenging each other. Well, the Philistines are challenging and the the Israelites are shaking in their boots. So on his way out there, he grabs 5 smooth stones, right, to use in his sling. Now the Philistine came, as he approached the Philistine, now the Philistine came closer to David and his shield bearer before him. When the Philistine looked and saw David, he despised him because he was just a boy, right? He was just a boy, not even a grown man, ruddy and handsome. This is quote, Goliath says this, "Am I a dog," he said to David, "that you come at me with sticks?" And the Philistine cursed David by his gods, little g, gods. "Come here," he called to David, "and I will give your flesh to the birds of the air and to the beasts of the field." In other words, I'm going to strike you down and leave your body out here rotting for all the varmints to come pick at, right? That's his threat to this boy. He even calls him a little boy. He probably felt somewhat offended that they would even send out a boy. He's used to being challenged by the biggest, best, strongest, warrior of his opposing army. Now here's the kicker here. But David said to the Philistine, notice Goliath was a giant. Notice what David does not say and what he does say. We're going to come back to that. But David said to the Philistine, quote, "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord of hosts." That word host means armies too. "The God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied." In other words, you're not on board with God. You're against God. That's not good for you. "This day the Lord will deliver you into my hand. This day I will strike you down, cut off your head," put a pin in that, "cut off your head, and give the carcasses of the Philistines' army to the birds of the air and the creatures of the earth. Then the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel, and all those assembled here will know that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's. He will give you all of you into our hands." Now, this is what I want you to think about here. He never mentions the size of Goliath. Not once. He never mentions Goliath's size, which had intimidated everybody else. David, it's almost like he didn't even see it. He's so focused on God and what God can use him for that he doesn't even count the size of the obstacle that he's going up against. He doesn't even bring that into consideration. And then also he says this, because Goliath gives him this little spiel, and I'm gonna strike you down and feed your flesh to the critters, right? David comes back and retorts with a 1-up, right? "I see your threat and I'm raising it to God's level," right? You say I'm just a boy, right? But not only am I going to strike you down, I'm going to cut off your head and give your carcasses of the whole army to the flesh of the birds of the air and the creatures of the earth, so that everybody will know that God is real. Everybody will know. Notice what I said earlier. David had to take off the armor. He had to take off the helmet. He had to take off the sword. He didn't even have a sword in his possession when he says, "I'm going to cut your head off." That's the threat he made. God's with me, and God's going to use me to cut your head off, Goliath. If that's not some confidence, I don't know what is. I don't even have a sword and I'm going to cut your head off. It's like, Goliath's got to be going, seriously, dude? What kind of empty threats is this? You don't even know what you're talking about, little boy. So here's the thing. Let's pick it up in verse 48. As the Philistines started forward to attack him, David ran toward the battle line to meet. He ran to the battle line. They started approaching, and he's like, I'm all in. Let's do this. I mean, you know how that had to kind of, man, whoa. I mean, the confidence that took in God to do. So as the Philistines started forward to attack him, David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet him. Then David reached into his bag, took out a stone, and slung it, striking the Philistine in the forehead. The stone sank into his forehead, and he fell face down on the ground. In other words, it's like a bullet shot to the forehead. This dude is not, he's dead. Deader than a doornail. This has not knocked him out. The dude is dead. And so, thus David prevailed. This is verse 50. Thus David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone. Without a sword in his hand, he struck down the Philistine and killed him. Now that's where the children's version usually stops, right? But here it goes on. 51. David ran and stood over him. Undoubtedly, he's facing the rest of those Philistines, and he goes and he stands over Goliath. He grabbed the Philistine's sword, pulled it from its sheath, and killed him, and he cut off his head with the sword. Imagine you're the Philistines. This little boy comes out, kills your top dog with a slingshot, runs over, pulls the guy's sword out of its sheath. It says it kills him, so he probably stabs him with it and then brings it back out. This is a huge sword, by the way, and slices the dude's head off. You're a prize warrior if you're a Philistine. You're dude, your top dog. You're witnessing this, and you're like, if the little one can do this, what can the big ones do to us, right? So they start scattering, and the Israelites take off, and, they do a number on them. They didn't kill them all, but they did a number on them. But what I want to go back to that, though, man. So he didn't even have a sword. He trusted in God so much. But what he did have was a sling and a stone. And if you go back to prior to what David had accomplished, he was a shepherd, right? When he comes down there, he's like, man, what is going on with this dude? And this Goliath that comes out and challenges him, right? So David's like, what's up with this guy? Got early so he set out to give his brother some food, blah, 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 right? And let's see here. I forgot where it's at. David says, what will be done for whoever takes out this Philistine? Because they was all scared. They told him what would happen. And let's see here. They're saying you can't go against him. So the king says, dude, you're too little. You can't do this, because he's looking at him from just human eyes, right? And David's like, your servant has been tending his father's sheep, and whenever a lion or a bear came and carried off a lamb from the flock, I went after it, struck it down, and delivered the lamb from its mouth. If it reared up against me, I would grab it by its fur, strike it down, and kill it. Your servant has killed lions and bears. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, for he has defied the armies of the living God. And then David added, the Lord, who delivered me from the claws of the lion and the bear, will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine. And that was the speech that got him the job, right? That was the speech that convinced Saul, okay, this kid might be onto something here. But what I want you to do is think about this. Like I said, he never even brought up the size of the obstacle. You know why? So this guy, this Goliath was big. He had weapons. He was a good fighter. But David had already faced big obstacles. God had already prepared David for this battle by his prior battles. I'm going to say that again. David was prepared for Goliath because he had prior battles. If David had never experienced any hardship, any challenges, any bumps in the road, any tough times, and all of a sudden Goliath shows up on the scene, he might have second thoughts. He might bow out. He might think, I've never done anything tough before. But that's not the case here. David said, this is no different than, dude, I've wrestled and killed lions and bears, and I'm just a boy. Don't tell me I can't take this dude out, especially with God's on my side. There ain't no way I can lose. He walked in there confident that there's no way he could lose because his 100% of his confidence was in his God, the God of heaven and earth, right? The creator of heaven and earth, the sustainer of heaven and earth, the God that created it all, keeps it all going. He knew his heart was 100% set on God's will, and he knew there ain't no way I can lose this deal. There's no way. No way I can lose. I don't even have a sword, but I want to cut this dude's head off. You know why? Because God's going to deliver him into my hands. I can't lose, right? I can't lose. Even in your toughest times, think about this, man. Just reading this and thinking about it, there has been so many situations in my life, and I'm sure you can emphasize with this. If you've gone through any hardships in your life, right? And especially for Christ, or hardships in your life where you had to rely solely or mainly on God to get you through it. Your faith, your strength in God. For one thing, you become galvanized. You become galvanized in your faith towards God. It has a transforming effect, a stiffening effect, I don't even know how to describe it. The words just don't even come to my mind. When you go through something like, I've mentioned the wreck deal, I've mentioned my cancer deal, I've mentioned, a prior career, the company kind of coming down on me for the Rainbow Mafia and everything. Those situations, when I was going through them, you don't realize what it's preparing you for or what it's pointing you towards. You think that is the biggest obstacle at the time while you're facing it. This is the biggest bear I've ever seen. This is the angriest lion I've ever seen. Little do you know, God is using that situation and can use that situation if you're sold out for God, that in the future, there's going to be something that's everybody will look at that and go, this is an insurmountable obstacle. There's no way you can win. And you're looking back going, I've done something similar before. This is not a 0 to jumping to 100 level of difficulty. I've experienced a 50 level difficulty, a 75 level difficulty in my life that God has delivered me through. So now all I got to do is make that little jump to this bigger obstacle, and I can rest on the faith and the experience of knowing that God's got me to this point through those other obstacles. Why can't he get me on to the next one? Why can't he use me more than he ever has in my next obstacle? It almost makes you look forward to the next challenge in your life. I love a cush life. I love just relaxing and not a care in the world. That would be great. Unfortunately, that's not how life is, right? That's not how life is. I'm recording this on a Saturday. I need to teach a Sunday school class tomorrow. Thankfully, I don't think we're going to have a whole lot of people there because Sunday school class is just starting. And here I am trying to record a podcast and losing my voice in the process. There's a good chance I won't even be able to speak tomorrow, and I will be the Shetland pony that I spoke about at the beginning. There's a good chance of that. But here we are. That is nothing. Now, there's people that if they were in that situation, they'd be like, oh my goodness, it's the end of the world. Well, this is nothing compared to what I've already gone through. This is just, okay, we can shoot from the hip and make this happen. This is no big deal. But this whole conversation harkens back to, I mentioned before, Brad Stein, the Christian comedian. He was at our church I attend recently. And his comment, out of everything that he said, which is it was an awesome thing. Out of everything that he said, the main thing that jumped out at me was this. When he said, suffering for Christ is not it's not a metaphor. He said, suffering for Christ is not a metaphor. It's just the way it is. Right? David was going up against insurmountable odds. By human standards, it's impossible, right? He's suffering ridicule from his brothers, ridicule from second guessing from the king Saul, and he's suffering ridicule from the obstacle, from Goliath, from the Philistine army, right? Most of us, me included, would likely back down from that, right? Most of us would. We would back down from that. But he says, look, I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm confident in God's ability to deliver this dude into my hands. So confident, I'm going to cut his head off. And I don't even got a sword. I didn't even bring a sword to the battle. And I'm going to cut his head off. That's how confident I am. Guys, I don't know about you, but that's powerful stuff. I've got to wrap it up. I'm going over time here. And I'm losing my voice in the process. But think about that. Think about that. Next time you're seeing the obstacle, David didn't even see how big. He refused to acknowledge how big the obstacle was. But all he focused on was how big the God he serves is. Think about that. He knew that he was going to cut that dude's head off, and he didn't even have a sword. That's how much confidence he had in God, man. That's how much confidence he had. Man, that's incredible stuff, guys. So think about that, man. Think about that, man. Oh, it's getting me fired up. I can't raise my voice much when I'm talking about it right now, but it's getting me fired up just thinking about it. Because it's so convicting for me, man. It's so convicting. How often do I doubt myself? Well, yes, you say it's a rhetorical question, but it's pretty much all the time. It may not come across to you like that, but it's pretty much all the time I'm doubting myself. And I have to trust in God. I have to place my trust in God, man. Whoa. That's good stuff, guys. That's good stuff. I hope this has blessed you. I hope this message really has. I hope it's come across good. I hope it's blessed you. I hope it's inspired you to turn the spine of a jellyfish into a spine of steel. Okay? Be on fire for God, man. Let's do this. Let's do this. And I hope you're having a great day, whatever day you watch this on. If you're watching the day it comes out, it'll be a Monday. If you're watching on down the line, man, I hope it blesses you. I hope it blesses you. And y'all have a blessed day.